The story you're about to hear is one that defies logic and challenges belief. It comes from a woman named Sarah Donovan, a 52-year-old accountant from Boston, Massachusetts. Sarah was, by her own admission, a skeptic practical to a fault, a woman who believed only in what she could see and touch. But all of that changed on a crisp autumn morning when a sudden accident transformed her life forever. Sarah recounts her experience in her own words, and I ask you to listen with an open heart. What follows isn't just a story, it's a profound message, one that she says she was chosen to deliver. Let her voice guide you into a realm where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual dissolve. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith. I never considered myself the type to believe in miracles or visions. Life had always seemed black and white to me. Facts, numbers, and logic ruled my world. As an accountant, I thrived on order and predictability. That's why the morning of November 15, 2024, started just like any other. I left my small apartment in Boston, coffee in hand, and drove my well-worn Ford Focus through the city's bustling streets. Completely unaware that everything was about to change. The air was crisp, tinged with the earthy smell of fallen leaves, and the streets were alive with the orange and gold hues of autumn. Halloween was just around the corner, and the city seemed to hum with a mix of anticipation and routine. I was running slightly behind schedule, as usual, but I wasn't overly concerned. My job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, a safe, predictable existence I had carefully built over decades. As I approached the intersection of Tremont Street and Boone, everything seemed to slow down. I heard the distant screech of tires, a sound that grew louder with every passing second. Turning my head, I saw a tanker truck barreling toward me, completely out of control. There was no time to react. The impact was immediate and brutal, a deafening crash of metal against metal, glass shattering like crystal rain. And then, silence. The silence was profound, as if the entire world had ceased to exist. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. I wasn't in the hospital either. I found myself standing in a vast, unearthly field that stretched endlessly in every direction. The ground beneath my feet shimmered like crystal, yet it felt as soft as the finest sand. The sky above was unlike anything I had ever seen, a strange mixture of light and darkness, as though dawn and dusk coexisted in perfect harmony. Ahead of me stood a gate, enormous and alive with energy. It wasn't made of wood or metal. It pulsed as though it had a heartbeat of its own, radiating a light that seemed to pierce through me, exposing every part of who I was. As I hesitated, unsure of where I was or what to do, I felt a presence, a powerful, overwhelming presence. It was both comforting and awe-inspiring, as though the very air around me vibrated with its essence. Then, he appeared, a man in a white robe, so radiant that I could barely look at him, stood before the gate. His face was indescribably beautiful, not in an earthly sense, but in a way that exuded peace, wisdom, and authority. My gaze was drawn immediately to his hands, where scars were visible, scars that seemed to glow faintly with the same light that surrounded him. I knew instantly who he was. My knees buckled, and I fell to the ground, unable to speak or even think clearly. Every fiber of my being recognized him as Jesus Christ. Despite my skepticism, my doubt, and my years of disbelief, there was no mistaking the reality of his presence. He spoke, and his voice wasn't just a sound, it was an echo that resonated deep within my soul. "Sarah," he said, his tone both commanding and gentle, "arise, do not be afraid, for I have chosen you for an important task." I trembled, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. Before I could ask what he meant, the field around us began to dissolve, replaced by a new scene that unfolded before my eyes like a living vision. The world I saw was our world, but it was as though I was standing outside of time, watching events unfold in a way I could feel and experience as if I were truly there. Jesus stood beside me, pointing toward the horizon. His expression was solemn, filled with both sorrow and determination. "The sound of the 7 trumpets is near," he said, "and humanity is blind to what is to come." I will show you what is in store for the earth. You must tell the world." I couldn't bring myself to speak. I could only nod, my heart racing as I prepared to witness the unimaginable. The air around us shifted, and the serene field disappeared, replaced by a vision that made my heart sink. I stood beside Jesus on a high vantage point, looking out over a world that seemed both familiar and foreign. The sky above was restless, churning with clouds that pulsed with an eerie, foreboding light. The horizon stretched out endlessly. And then, as if on cue, I heard it, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The first trumpet had sounded. Above the land, fire and ice began to rain from the heavens. I could see it clearly, great chunks of burning ice cascading down, engulfing forests in flames and reducing entire regions to ash within moments. Trees crackled and snapped under the intense heat, their remnants consumed by an unrelenting blaze. People below screamed in panic, scattering in all directions, but there was no escape. The destruction was absolute, merciless. I turned to Jesus, my voice trembling. "Why is this happening? What does it mean?" His eyes, filled with both sorrow and resolve, met mine. "This is the initial purification," he said. "The earth will be cleansed. But even after this, many will harden their hearts." As soon as the last of the flames died down, the scene shifted again, and the sound of the second trumpet filled the air. It was louder this time, more piercing, like a call that reached into the very depths of the earth. I looked out over the oceans, and my heart broke at what I saw. The waters turned a deep, sickly red, like blood, spreading rapidly across the seas. Fish and whales floated lifelessly on the surface, their bodies bloated and decaying. The stench was unbearable, a tangible manifestation of death and despair. I watched as ships tried to navigate the bloodied waters. Their crews panicked and confused. One by one, the vessels sank, swallowed whole by the poisoned seas. Jesus stood silently beside me, his expression grave. "Creation suffers because of the sins of humanity," he explained. "This is the second warning. But still, they will not listen." Before I could process what I had just witnessed, the sound of the third trumpet reverberated through the air. It was as if the sky itself had split open, revealing a brilliant star that burned like a torch. The star hurtled toward the earth, striking rivers and springs with devastating precision. Jesus called it wormwood. I watched in horror as the fresh waters turned bitter, poisoned by the star's impact. People, desperate for water, drank it anyway, only to collapse in agony, their faces twisted in pain, their bodies convulsing as death claimed them. Tears streamed down my face as I witnessed this unimaginable suffering. Jesus reached for my hand, his touch grounding me amidst the chaos. "Even so," he said softly, "they will not repent." The next scene unfolded as the sound of the fourth trumpet echoed through the heavens. The light of the sun, moon, and stars dimmed until the sky was shrouded in darkness. It wasn't the natural darkness of night, it was deeper, heavier, as though time itself had stopped. People below cried out in terror, searching desperately for light, but there was none to be found. I felt a chill run through me as I looked up at the darkened sky. It was as if the world had lost its very essence, its connection to life and hope. "This darkness," Jesus said, "is a reflection of the spiritual blindness that has overtaken humanity." I was barely holding myself together when the sound of the fifth trumpet tore through the silence. This time, the vision became even more terrifying. From an abyss in the earth, hideous creatures began to emerge. They were like locusts, but with faces twisted into grotesque forms that were part human, part demon. Their wings buzzed with an unbearable sound, and their bodies exuded a menacing, otherworldly glow. These creatures didn't kill, instead, they tormented. They descended upon humanity, stinging and biting with a cruelty that seemed endless. The people's screams echoed in my soul, their pain so raw and unrelenting that it became difficult to breathe. They begged for death, but it would not come. "These are the torments of those who reject the light," Jesus said, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and righteous authority. "They will cry out for relief, but it will flee from them." I turned to him, my voice breaking. "Why are you showing me this? What can I do?" His gaze softened, and his hand rested on my shoulder. "Because you must tell them. Sarah, you must warn them. The sound of the 7 trumpets is near, and humanity must prepare. I nodded, though my heart was heavy with the weight of what I had seen. The visions were far from over, and I knew that whatever lay ahead would challenge me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But I also knew that I couldn't turn away, not now, not after witnessing such profound truth. With the sound of the 6th trumpet looming, the air around us began to shift again, and I braced myself for what was to come. The air grew colder, denser, as the sound of the 6th trumpet echoed through the heavens. It was deeper and more resonant than the others, carrying a weight that seemed to press against my chest. The scene before me transformed again, and I found myself looking at a barren, desolate battlefield. The land was cracked and scorched, littered with remnants of structures that had once stood strong. An eerie stillness hung in the air, broken only by the distant sound of marching. From the horizon, I saw them 4 figures moving with a chilling authority. They were colossal and fearsome, each exuding a dark energy that seemed to warp the space around them. These were the 4 fallen angels, released from their imprisonment to carry out destruction on an unimaginable scale. Behind them followed vast armies of supernatural creatures, their forms grotesque and terrifying, marching with a singular purpose: to bring chaos to the earth. The armies spread across the land, and the destruction began. They swept through cities like a relentless storm, sparing nothing in their path. Buildings crumbled, flames engulfed entire neighborhoods, and the cries of the perishing filled the air. I watched in horror as humanity was decimated, a third of the population wiped out in mere moments. The scale of the devastation was incomprehensible, and the air seemed thick with despair and anguish. "Why?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. "Why must so many suffer?" Jesus, standing beside me with unwavering calm, spoke with a firmness that resonated deep within me. "This is the consequence of rebellion, Sarah. Humanity has ignored every call to repentance. Their hearts remain hardened, even as creation itself cries out in agony. This is the 6th warning. Yet still, many will not turn back." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the weight of the vision. The cries of those left behind echoed in my ears, their faces etched with fear and hopelessness. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes and block out the horror. But I couldn't. This was the truth, and it had to be seen. The battlefield faded, replaced by a vast, endless darkness. It was so absolute that it felt as though the very fabric of reality had unraveled. The sound of the 7th trumpet began to build, faint at first but growing steadily, reverberating through the void. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, powerful, commanding, and filled with an otherworldly resonance. It was as though the entirety of creation was trembling in anticipation. From the darkness, a light began to emerge. It wasn't a gentle or comforting light, it was blinding, consuming, and overwhelming. Out of this light rose a throne, vast, majestic, and surrounded by an aura that radiated authority. I couldn't look directly at it, but I knew without a doubt that this was the throne of God. It stood as the ultimate symbol of power, justice, and holiness, and its presence filled me with both awe and fear. Surrounding the throne were countless angels, their forms perfect and radiant. They stood in rows so precise it seemed as though the universe itself had aligned to their rhythm. Each angel held a trumpet, and the sound they produced reverberated through every corner of existence. It wasn't just a sound, it was a declaration, a call that pierced through the soul. On the ground below, humanity knelt. Millions, perhaps billions, prostrated themselves before the throne. Some wept in despair, their faces twisted in fear and regret, while others cried out for mercy, their voices breaking under the weight of their pleas. I saw familiar faces among the crowd: children, adults, and the elderly, all laid bare before the throne of God. There was no hiding, no pretense, only the raw reality of who they were and the choices they had made. Books were brought forth, one shimmering like the sky itself, radiant and golden, and the other dark and foreboding, its presence consuming the light around it. Jesus turned to me, his expression both solemn and compassionate. "These are the books of life and death," he said. "The fate of all who have lived will now be determined." I watched as names were called from the golden book. Each name was greeted with joyous singing and celebration from the angels, a radiant chorus that filled the heavens. But then, names from the dark book were read, and I saw something that made my soul tremble. Souls were snatched away by forces I could barely comprehend, dark, shadowy entities that moved with terrifying swiftness. The air was filled with screams of terror, their echoes reverberating through the void. "What you see now, Sarah," Jesus said, his voice steady, "is only the beginning. When the seventh trumpet sounds in full, the earth will be renewed, and my kingdom will be established. But for many, it will be too late." As he spoke, the scene shifted once more. The sky split open as if it were a scroll being rolled up. The earth quaked violently, mountains crumbled into dust, and oceans surged over the land, consuming everything in their path. Stars fell from the heavens, cascading like fire through the sky. Creation itself was being dismantled, torn apart to make way for something new. I screamed, unable to contain the terror that gripped me. "Please, make it stop," I begged, but Jesus held me firmly, his voice filled with both authority and reassurance. "Tell the world, Sarah," he said. "They need to know. Time is short. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. My reward is with me, and I am coming soon. They must be prepared." Tears streamed down my face as I realized the enormity of what I had been shown. This wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action, a final opportunity for humanity to turn back before it was too late. As the light around us began to fade, I knew that my life would never be the same again. I had been chosen to carry this message, and I couldn't let fear or doubt hold me back. When the vision ended, I found myself back at the gate, trembling and overwhelmed. Jesus looked at me one final time, his eyes filled with compassion. "Sarah," he said, "do not fear rejection. Do not fear what others will say. Speak boldly, for the fate of many depends on your obedience." With those words, I felt the vision dissolve completely, and I was pulled back to the world I had left behind. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the hospital. The bright, sterile lights overhead were a stark contrast to the brilliance of the vision I had just witnessed. My body ached, and I felt an unbearable weight pressing on my chest, not a physical pain, but the heaviness of what I had been shown. My hands trembled as I tried to process everything, but there was no time to linger in my thoughts. The sound of familiar voices broke through the haze. My husband, John, and my daughter, Emily, were at my bedside. I heard their muffled cries, felt the warmth of their hands gripping mine, but I could barely focus on them. The words Jesus had spoken echoed in my mind. "Time is short. They must be prepared. She's waking up," someone shouted, and the room erupted into activity. Doctors and nurses rushed in, their voices overlapping as they called for tests and asked questions. But I had only one thing to say, and it burst from my lips like a flood breaking through a dam. "Jesus is coming back," I said, my voice hoarse but resolute. Everyone froze for a moment, their faces a mix of relief and confusion. The medical staff exchanged glances, chalking it up to trauma or delirium. John leaned closer, his expression filled with concern. "Sarah, you've been through a lot. Just rest, okay?" I shook my head weakly, my voice gaining strength. "No, you don't understand. I saw him. I was there. He showed me everything, the trumpets, the throne, the judgment. It's real, John. It's all real." Emily's eyes welled with tears, and she grasped my hand tightly. "Mom, you've been unconscious for days. You were in an accident. You almost didn't make it. Maybe it was a dream. Or, it wasn't a dream," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I know what I saw. I was with him. Jesus is coming back, and he's giving us one last chance to prepare." The doctors gently advised my family to give me some space, attributing my words to the aftereffects of trauma. But I couldn't let it go. Even as they tried to reassure me, I felt an urgency growing within me. This wasn't just for me or my family, it was for everyone. Once I was alone, I closed my eyes and began to pray, tears streaming down my face. "Lord, I'm scared," I whispered. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to tell the world. But I trust you. Please, give me strength." A sense of peace washed over me, soft but unmistakable, as if Jesus himself was there, reminding me of his words. "Do not fear rejection. Speak boldly, for the fate of many depends on your obedience." I resolved then and there that I would share what I had seen, no matter the cost. Over the next few days, As I regained my strength, I began to tell my story. At first, it was only to John and Emily. I recounted every detail of the vision, the trumpets, the judgments, the throne, and the message of urgency that Jesus had given me. They listened in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from disbelief to awe. By the time I finished, Emily's cheeks were streaked with tears. "Mom," she said softly, "if this is true, what do we do? How do we prepare?" "We pray," I said. "We repent. We turn back to God with everything we have. And we tell others, everyone we can." John, who had always been the steady, rational one, nodded slowly. "If this is what you believe, Sarah, then we'll stand with you. Whatever it takes." Their support gave me courage. But I knew it wouldn't be so easy with others. When I began to share my experience with extended family and friends, the reactions were mixed. Some listened intently, their faces marked by the same awe and fear I had felt in the vision. Others dismissed it outright, offering polite smiles and saying things like, "You must have been dreaming. It sounds like your mind was working overtime while you were unconscious." I didn't let the doubters discourage me. Jesus' words echoed in my heart every time I faced resistance. "Speak boldly." I wasn't sharing this for validation or approval, I was sharing it because I had been commanded to. The more I spoke, the more I realized that my role wasn't to convince. It was simply to plant seeds and let God work in the hearts of those who heard. One evening, as I rested at home, I received a call from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Word of my experience had reached her, and she wanted to know more. I recounted everything to her. And when I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Sarah," she finally said, her voice trembling, "I've been struggling with my faith for so long. Hearing this, it feels like a wake-up call, like God is giving me another chance." Tears filled my eyes as I realized that the message was beginning to take root. It wasn't just about warning people of what was to come, it was about offering hope. A chance to turn back before it was too late. Every person who listened, every heart that softened, reminded me that the mission was worth it. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to share the message. I spoke with neighbors, co-workers, and even strangers when the opportunity arose. Some dismissed me, but others listened with an intensity that told me they understood the gravity of what I was saying. I didn't know how far my words would reach, but I trusted that Jesus would guide them where they needed to go. Each night, I knelt in prayer, asking for strength and wisdom. "Lord," I prayed, "I am just one voice. But with you, I know that even the smallest voice can carry far. Please, use me for your purpose." I knew the journey wouldn't be easy. The vision still haunted me, the cries of the suffering, the finality of the judgments, the overwhelming presence of the throne. But what gave me hope was the promise Jesus had spoken: "Time is short. But there is still time. Tell them to prepare." It was a message of both warning and grace, and I would spend the rest of my life ensuring it was heard. The days following my vision felt like a whirlwind. The heaviness of the message I carried stayed with me, but so did the urgency to share it. I had seen things no one else could fully understand unless they had walked through the same experience. Yet, I knew it was my duty to speak, no matter the reaction I faced. Every rejection, every skeptical glance, every dismissive comment reminded me of Jesus' words: "Do not fear rejection. Speak boldly, for the fate of many depends on your obedience." Months passed, and the rhythm of my life had entirely changed. I was no longer just Sarah Donovan, the quiet, logical accountant from Boston. My days were filled with conversations, prayer groups, and letters from people who had heard my story. It started small: neighbors, friends, and my local church. But soon, it spread further than I could have imagined. Strangers reached out to me, asking questions, seeking guidance, or sharing how my vision had touched their lives. One evening, as I sat by the window in my small apartment, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I opened a letter that had come in the mail. It was from a young man named Daniel in Paris. His words were raw, filled with both fear and hope. "I came across your story through a video someone shared," he wrote. "At first, I dismissed it as just another dramatic tale meant to scare people. But as I listened, something stirred in me. Your words felt like a mirror, reflecting back the unease I've been carrying for years. I've always felt disconnected from God, but now I see how far I've drifted. Your message hit me like a lightning bolt. I need to change. I need to turn back to Him. I folded the letter and placed it on the table, my hands trembling. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the impact of this journey. Daniel was a reminder that my task wasn't in vain. Even if only one person's heart softened, it was worth it. The following week, I spoke at a church gathering. The sanctuary was modest, filled with people who had heard about my vision through word of mouth. I shared every detail: the trumpets, the throne, the books of life and death, and Jesus's words to me. I spoke of the destruction and despair I had witnessed, but I also emphasized the hope. Time is short, but there is still time. Redemption is still possible. Afterward, a young woman named Rachel approached me. She was visibly shaken, her eyes glistening with tears. I didn't even want to come tonight, she admitted. My friend dragged me here, but when you spoke, it was like you were speaking directly to me. I've felt so lost for so long, but now I see what I need to do. We prayed together right there in the sanctuary. Rachel's voice trembled as she asked God for forgiveness and guidance, and I felt a deep sense of peace knowing that her heart had turned back to Him. It was moments like these that reminded me why I couldn't stop, no matter how exhausting or challenging the journey became. As the anniversary of my vision approached, I spent more time in reflection. The images of the 7 trumpets, the throne, and the final judgment were as vivid as ever. They played in my mind like scenes from a film, each one reminding me of the stakes. The cries of those tormented by the 5th trumpet, the joy of the names called from the book of life, the despair of those cast into darkness, they were all seared into my memory. One night, as I knelt in prayer, I felt overwhelmed. The mission felt so much bigger than me, and the weight of it pressed heavily on my spirit. Lord, I prayed, I am only one person. How can I possibly reach everyone? How can I make them see? In that moment of vulnerability, a profound sense of peace washed over me. It was as though Jesus Himself was there, reminding me of His words, "Speak boldly. The seeds you plant will grow." I realized then that it wasn't my job to save everyone, it was my job to be obedient, to speak the truth, and to trust God to do the rest. The vision had a ripple effect far beyond what I could have imagined. People began to share my story through videos, articles, and conversations. I received letters from around the world, countries I had never visited, places I could barely locate on a map. Some shared how the message had reignited their faith. Others confessed that it had made them face truths they had long avoided. One letter came from a man in South America who had been on the brink of despair. He described how he had been planning to end his life when he stumbled upon a recording of my talk. "Hearing your words," he wrote, "reminded me that God hasn't given up on me. If He's giving humanity another chance, then maybe He's giving me one too." I wept as I read his letter. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could break through. Despite the overwhelming responses, I also faced resistance. Some people mocked me, accusing me of fabricating the story for attention. Others dismissed me as a delusional woman recovering from a traumatic accident. At first, their words stung, but I reminded myself of Jesus's command, "Do not fear rejection." I wasn't here to please people or defend myself, I was here to deliver a message. One particularly difficult encounter occurred at a public event where I was invited to speak. After I finished, a man in the audience stood up and said, "This is nothing but fear-mongering. You had a dream, and now you're trying to scare everyone with it. Where's the proof?" For a moment, I was at a loss for words. But then I felt a calmness settle over me, and I responded, "You're right, I can't prove what I've seen. All I can do is share the truth of what I was shown. It's up to you to decide what to do with it. But ask yourself this: if there's even a chance that this message is real, would you risk ignoring it?" The room fell silent, and though the man didn't respond, I saw others nodding thoughtfully. It wasn't about winning an argument, it was about planting seeds, even in the hardest soil. Now, as I look back on the years since my vision, I'm filled with both humility and resolve. The mission is far from over, but I've seen enough to know that the message is reaching those who need it most. For every person who dismisses it, there's another who finds their way back to God. For every heart that remains hardened, there's one that softens and repents. The vision wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. Jesus didn't show me these things to leave me in despair. He showed them to remind humanity that time is short. But grace is still abundant. There's still hope for those who choose to turn back. As I share this story with you now, I pray that it stirs something within you. This isn't just my story, it's a call for all of us to reflect, repent, and prepare. The sound of the 7 trumpets is near, but so is the opportunity for redemption. What we do today will determine where we stand when the final trumpet sounds. Jesus is coming back. Are you ready? If you feel the weight of these words, don't ignore them. Let them guide you back to the one who loves you and is calling you home. Time is short, but there is still time. Choose wisely. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith.